So people are rolling in, so I'm going to start making introductions so that we can begin this conversation, which I am really excited to be hosting on Al Sarkal Online. I'm Nada Raza. I work with the Al Sarkal Arts Foundation. Welcome to this conversation titled On Invisibility and Cyclical Time with Hera Büyüktaşciyan and Hajra Haider. The conversation is centered tonight around a film which is actually on view physically at Green Art Gallery at Al Sarkal at the moment. The film Infinite Nectar was first shown at the Lahore Biennial, which was earlier this year. It feels like a very long time ago, but it was actually this January. And Hera and Hajra worked together on bringing this film to life. It was screened at the Lahore Museum. And it really sort of brings many of Hera's interest in memory and architecture into a South Asian geography. And I think in terms of it being a sort of transnational collaborative work of not just art making, but also of research. I think it opens up really interesting lines of thought and inquiry for both artist and curator. By way of introduction, Hera is an artist. As I mentioned, she's had an interest in architecture, history, memory, particularly in places which are sort of post-conflict scenarios. And Hajra Haider, who is between Pakistan and Germany and is a researcher and curator, and also kind of interested in questions of, I guess, criticality, politics, justice, and so on. And they're both people whose work, whose practices I have been following for a while. So I'm really pleased to hand over now to Hera and Hajra. Just a bit of housekeeping. The conversation will be about 45 minutes, and then we'll open it up to an audience Q&A. If you have any comments that you would like us to kind of bring into the Q&A or questions, feel free to use the chat box or raise your hand, and we'll unmute you and allow you to ask your question. So we're happy with whatever you feel comfortable with. So a big thank you to our speakers for making the time tonight, and over to you guys.
Thank you for the generous introductions, Nada. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank you and the Al Sarkal Foundation for providing this wonderful opportunity to continue this conversation with Hera. I'm really looking forward to exploring the deep connections that multiple histories have to our present through Hera's work, and attempting to understand if our positionalities have shifted or remain the same, but just in another guise. As most of you probably already know, Hera's solo exhibition is up at the Green Art Gallery right now, titled On Stones and Palimpsests. It's quite a timely exhibition where we are currently witnessing erasures being exercised all around us. Whether it's in the name of reclaiming histories or preserving identities or integrities of the nation states. It's quite a critical moment of rewriting and overwriting of histories. It's also, I feel that this exhibition is also a reminder for us as to how deeply the past resonates with the present. And how often histories, albeit the strategic erasures, resurface, questioning our positionalities and also reminding us of our vulnerabilities. I would like to begin this conversation with the phrase that is at the core of Hera's practice, and that is of cyclical movement of time, where there is a consistent and continued connection of the past to the present. So Hera, you identify yourself as a storyteller, And I've been wondering, like, how do you maintain, or rather, what kind of parallels do you think exist between storytelling and official historical accounts? And then how do you contend with the contested notion of history, and then how do you think that historical ruptures connect with the present? And here again, I'm coming back to your phrase of, like, where you say cyclical movement of time and your interpretation of it.
Yes, thank you, Hajra. Before I start, I would like to also thank to Nada and to the Al Serkal Foundation for their generous invite and for hosting us today and bringing us together again, actually, to travel back to Lahore and to all these invisibility stories. Coming to your question, I think storytelling to me is like a mediator or like a language that I often build up to be able to reflect upon things that have been hidden or that are not easily being spoken outside. Unlike within history, there are certain things that are being discreetly said or like has really sharp edges even. But it doesn't allow you to build up things, or also depending on the current situation, as well as even throughout the cyclical moments of time, there has been all these witnessing and being silenced, all these matters. And I think storytelling came into scene to make things easier and to give a sense of freedom to certain things to manifest themselves in a way. And I think storytelling to me is like a deconstruction of certain things, and I try to deform what is perceived in general and try to free it to by giving a new narrative to it. A new narrative, I mean, I also add my own reflections from my own life and from all these particles that are kind of gathering within my own memory. So in that sense, it is like something that like evoking my memory and practice. So in that sense, it's like an active conversation that allows things to come into the surface of the water and keeps on reminding itself. And in a sense, it's like distilling. It's like distilling an enormous event or like a chain of events, let's say, that makes things more graspable and more, in a way, kind of digestible, let's say, things that are not easy to say. And coming to how I contested histories, actually, I think this question is kind of interesting to hear today, because how it resonates within me, it's quite interesting, especially all of us who are interested in this idea of absence. And mostly I think of myself who is kind of dealing with absence within architecture, its resonances, and this idea of ruin. It's quite interesting to see all these things that keep on repeating and coming in front of us while we are researching these, and we are the ones who start to experience it live as well, whilst you are trying to solve all these kind of let's say codes within your own practice. It becomes a part of the life living experience as well. So in a way, the way I contend all these ruptures is like to unfold different layers of time, and to be able to render and read these different fragments of time, to anchor it and let it coexist with what is today. And this happens with often asking questions and trying to situate things, and sometimes by abstracting things in a way.
Right, right. And that also brings me to the question, especially because when we are talking about, storytelling also, and even this is something that comes in historical accounts as well, because it's often about who is telling the story, right? And who's writing it. And I'm just wondering, like, how, in your case, for example, how can the paradigm of truth or an aspect of it can be upheld in the sense, because it's almost, can be upheld while documenting or retelling another's story. And I'm asking this especially because there are certain moments in your work which are almost like gestures of decolonization even.
Yes.
So perhaps like if you could, elaborate on that.
I think I always feel like no matter if it's a matter coming from my own geography, or especially in the case of this film, like a totally alien geography to my own knowledge, let's say, I feel that there is always a sense of fragility and vulnerability between the case that I'm researching and even my own self, because I'm always fearing this matter of intruding something that I do not know. And in a sense, when you are narrating someone else's narrative, or retelling their story, you kind of manifest, or let's say make their life visible. So in a sense, I always feel that I am the one who is kind of not this idea of being a representative, but
I think 1 second, we are missing your
Hi,
voice. Yeah. Okay, it's back. It's back now.
Oh,
it's
sorry,
back now.
sorry.
Yeah, we missed a bit of what you were saying, so maybe you could go back to it.
Yes, I was talking about this idea of vulnerability and the fragility of this matter of retail.
Still, it's
we lost you again
a little bit.
Remove the headphone now.
Maybe, yeah, now it's good. Now it's good. Yeah.
So I was actually talking about the idea of vulnerability that I feel, and there is this sense of fragility about something that I'm retelling of somebody else's story, because no matter how much you have knowledge and how much you research, still there is this very fragile boundary that that makes me feel that, am I becoming an intruder, or should I become respectful and try to add my own narrative with it, try to find my own voice inside, and deconstruct that whole narrative altogether in order to be able to feel myself within this narrative. And of course, this often comes with a question of why I'm dealing with this, or why am I in search with this thing, and why do all these reflections and constant mirrorings get my attention and want to kind of reveal themselves in my own practice and life, in a sense.
Right.
So I think it's a matter of constant, not fighting, but more of editing and trying to be like truthful to your own self in the beginning, apart from being truthful to what you are trying to reflect upon, I guess.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that. So here I'm also now thinking about, like, just from what you're saying, because you also speak about reading transmitted silence. And I'm wondering if there is any connection between that and your inclination towards the terrestrial and the imaginary, where you prefer to conduct a sensorial dialogue rather than one facilitated by words. And here I'm like, it's something that Zaina Bahraini has also picked up on, where, it's like where you say that what the ground remembers.
Yeah.
So it's, so I'm just thinking if you could, maybe share a bit more about that with us.
I think what the ground remembers is something that is like a key point for me, that I try to remember, or it reminds itself wherever I go within my practice, within my own life. And it's a continuous question, a cyclical question almost, that I often ask, because the ground is actually the main layer that recollects everything. It destroys everything, it hides everything, and it's up to us to kind of unearth it, in essence. So in terms of this, I think my relationship of how I read spaces is kind of interesting, because I discovered this kind of cyclical movement, or let's say the aquatic nature of remembrance and forgetting through spaces. And so in a sense, I think that like spaces are like living organisms who are breathing, no matter if they are kind of abandoned or if they have certain lost fragments. But in a way, it intrigues certain traces for us to be able to read. And I guess this is what I mean in terms of, you know, the terrestrial, I guess. The space itself is like the main point that imbibes both the terrestrial and the imaginary, because a space is not only a physical place, but also it's a virtual reality that kind of hides all these fragments of time, whoever has been leaving all their traces. So in a sense, I also read our own mind like a space, like a production of space, I could even call, especially, you know, when we forget a space, we forget its form and its own physicality. But when we try to remember it, at that moment, we put new information.
I'm sorry, Hera, the audio seems to, there seems to be a problem again.
Oh.
Hajra, can you hear Hera?
Yeah, I was able to hear her.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, continue. It's fine now. It's okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. So what I was saying was, you know, there is a kind of an aquatic nature to this act of constant remembering and forgetting, and the relationship of it with space. So I think this aquatic nature is more like, I resemble it to this tidal movement, which is, you know, when there is low tide, certain things reveal themselves, and then when there is high tide, it constantly hides everything. And then in a way, a space imbibes all these things, no matter if it's like a crack on the wall, or if it's a puddle on the ground on the tiles, and then it reflects on something that you can't see normally. So I think our senses and the physicality, as well as the imaginary, the thing that is imaginary within a site, creates all these sensorial connectivities, I should say.
Right. Yeah, and I'm just going to like now, you know, expand that idea of space a little bit, because one encounters resonating histories in distant lands and varied geographies in your practice, because you are not just restricted to one site or one history, but there are, even if we look at your current exhibition, there are 3 projects which are speaking about distant lands, yet, and also temporal histories, and different timelines, but there is a certain resonance between these histories. And I was just wondering, like, apart from the works that are currently showing in the exhibition, some of your previous projects, like In Situ and the Jerusalem project, and which were also, you know, come into one of the, like, the few instances where you have engaged with. And I was thinking, how do you interpret these mirrorings, these resonances, and how do you like work with them?
I think these 2 specific works that we are going to talk about are specific pieces that actually made me question this aquatic nature of time, and how space operates together with that. So and also these are pieces that also evoked these questions of what the ground remembers, because the ground is actually the actual layer that kind of recollects all these instances. So In Situ was a site-specific piece I have made at Peace Interdisciplinary Space at 2013. And this was about actually a Turkish bath that was once in the area, and it was transformed into a hotel at 90s. So what I have done over here, which I often also do in many of my site-specific works, is to make an oral history study with the people within the region. And simply, my question was how they were remembering the Turkish bath from their own childhood or from within their memory. And the 20 people that I interviewed were interestingly giving 20 different descriptions, which was quite interesting. And at that point, I started to understand how the mind functions in terms of having a fluid ground and even a slippery ground. So what I have done here was I have used soap as a kind of element, like a pavement stone. And I followed the same pattern that was in the same street. And I just let the soap, let it flood within the space and create a ground that is kind of an unwalkable ground. But here, what was interesting is that there were 3,000 soap cubes within the space. And because there were so many soap, the smell began to go out from the space, and the street was at some point smelling like soap. So the people who were the residents in the region, they started to say that when the Turkish bath was here, the street was exactly smelling like this.
Amazing.
So in a sense, I think these tidal movements, this is what I mean about these tidal movements, because certain things reveal themselves and then they sink inside that fluid after a while of our mind. And of course, again, just like the nature of the soap itself, it creates a slipperiness of ground. And here we see certain bumps and certain points that it doesn't allow us to walk within the space. And in a sense, the ground becomes something more uncanny and it can't carry us anymore. Just like the ground of our mental space as well. When we forget something, things totally disappear. And when we try to remember something, we reconstruct by putting new information over it. And yeah, this was another piece from the same exhibition, which I call Forgetting and Remembering. And here we have these two brass pieces whose heads are clashing to each other. And that's what I was meaning about the recreation moment, or when forgetting and remembering joins to each other. Another example which you were mentioning was the recovery of an early water. This was a piece I have done in the Jerusalem show at 2014. And this was actually, this could become an example of dealing with a contested history, because the site itself have been completely invisible to even to the locals, because this is a site within the old part of Jerusalem. And how I discovered this site was I was on the top of one of these buildings, and I just noticed this huge gap. And then after all my researches, I found out that this was an ancient water storage, like an open air cistern made before Christ at the 4th century. And the king who has built up all these architecture within time have been bringing, the one who was bringing water. But interestingly, not much different from the politics of today of the region, because they were in war with the Assyrians. What he has done was to dry up all these water means and build up a tunnel underneath the ground in order to hide the water and keep away his enemy. So these are some images from my research phase, some images from the archaeologists. And these are some sketches that whilst I was studying all this notion of what is invisible, what manifests itself within time. So we see from unexpected points, things that are flooding the dried up space. So so within the piece, what I have done, I can call it more like a kind of a gestural thing, which was I was trying to, let's say, manifest something that has been invisible for a very long time and let it flow backwards. So in a way, this is like bending time. I guess storytelling allows it as well, because it bends time. It allows you to imbibe so many different timelines together and try to read today from that point of view. And here this fabric was passing by, which was actually a fabric I have seen on top of these buildings, which was passing by, or let's say flowing throughout the whole city over the bazaar places. And here, through this work, actually, what was really interesting was the people who are living in the region could access the site and, you know, enjoy, like the kids who could touch the ground almost and try to feel what it is like, because it was a huge space as well.
Great, great. And yeah, I think I can never, I can just go on speaking about them and hearing about them and asking you questions. But in respect of time, I'm going to now move on to something closer to our project. And I'm thinking about now Amritsar and Lahore. And they're both neighboring cities which are divided by a tense border. And the project that we worked on, the Infinite Nectar, that was conducted in Lahore, but it has a preceding chapter which took place in Amritsar called The Deconstructors. And I was thinking, like, can you talk a bit about your experience of both these cities, and how did this divide function for you?
Yes, yes. Actually, as you mentioned, my first departure point was the Indian part of Punjab, and everything started in Amritsar at 2016 with a visit of mine. But at that first visit became quite interesting because you know, we all have these certain moments when we travel somewhere and we feel at home, or kind of certain particles within the city, let's say like architectural reflections, or certain a smell, something you hear reminds you certain aspects that derives from your own memory and your own geography. So this series came to life through all these resonances, and I continued this series until 2018. And the beginning point was more of something that I have seen at a memorial garden called Jallianwala Bagh. And there was this bullet marks that were from the colonial time, that there has been a huge firing towards people who were celebrating the harvest day. And that mark specifically affected me a lot, because there has been this constant repetition in many of my works, as you can see, these cubic forms or mosaic-like patterns that I often use for kind of unfolding certain things or tracing things. And through that bullet mark, let's say the traced bullet mark, I began to have a lot of resonances within the city. Let's say the typical architecture within all parts of Punjab, which is the brick architecture, or the marble tiles that is in the Gurudwaras. Specifically, the first part was in the Golden Temple. So I began to travel to different parts of Punjab after Amritsar, like Chandigarh, Patiala, Jalandhar. So in order to be able to understand how this division first started, like the core place, how it took place, and how it affected architecture and material memory within architecture. Because I mean, this idea of material memory evokes also and shows itself more in unstable places and unstable geographies. So this series came out from all those cubic forms, and you see a certain flow that is happening over here. And whilst I was working on this piece throughout the time, I had this thought of actually wanting to see what is on the other side in order to be able to understand the whole situation in an open way. And for example, specifically, this image has been quite a decisive moment for me whilst I was capturing it in the Corbusier Museum. This is an image that was taken by the constructors who were destroying the houses in that whole region in order to be able to build up new architecture for a new capital. And behind the mountains, there is Pakistan, and in a sense, this division made me feel it more, this idea of absence and how things have been silenced in a sense. So this constant flow began to kind of become like a kind of wish for me to pass to the other side in order to see, not only understand the whole dynamics, how this division happened, also for the Sikh community basically as well, but to understand my own geography also. It was really important for me to do that travel to the other side. Here there are these images. The one at the right hand side is Amritsar, and the other one is an older photo from Lahore. There's actually no difference. Like, you feel both sides are almost the same, and that's what also I felt when I passed to Lahore. And here on the left side, again, there is a photo we have taken together on top of one of these older schools, an image from Lahore, and then the other one is from Amritsar. And almost it's like they complete each other, no matter if they're taken at different timelines, different geographies on two sides of the border, but actually it's a whole.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, like, you're sharing this experience, and I'm also thinking that your experience is also somehow formally translated as well, because we see a shift between a still image and collages that you were doing, that you did for the Amritsar part of the research. And then you move into moving image, once again with collage as a recurring aspect. And I was just, can you like talk a bit about how, you know, this shift took place and how it was influenced by your experience in each of these cities?
Yes. Actually, I think the way how I decided to travel to the other side also activated certain things for me within my mind. And I guess for me, according to my own experience, and whilst in the making of these collages in the Indian part of the Punjab, to me, it felt like things were more petrified in terms of mostly time-wise and more covered up. And I kind of actually wanted to activate this history, and wanted to let things flow backwards in a sense, because that is the moment. I always believe that when you start to dismantle something and like let all this bended time to flow backwards, helps you to, you know, make things things become more performative and more activated in terms of activating a history that was kind of buried underneath the ground. And also, I think when I was thinking about even the word Punjab, it is the land of the 5 rivers. And the 5 rivers are also divided by all these kind of political borders. And I think even thinking of the whole Sikh identity also, and the belief system, water is something, and fluidity itself is something that is really very vibrant within that whole thing. And thinking of all these things, I started to think that, you know, we should let these waters that have been still for a while, let flow, in order to be able to activate certain things that weren't being spoken, or being more, you know, hidden. So it was more like a kind of digging in, even within my own practice. I think also it also kind of resonates within my own life, to be able to find a different language to be able to read things in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and this just brings me to to Lahore now. And I had the privilege to do an artistic and curatorial collaboration with you in Lahore for the Infinite Nectar. And I'm just thinking, like, after researching for a very long time into archives and all kinds of online available resources or published resources, we entered the city finally in 2008, 9, 19. Was it 19? Yes,
19, but
2009.
Work 2018.
Yeah, because we've been trying it for a while. So yeah, and we entered it in 2019, thinking of invisible histories. But what we encountered were actually invisible sites and invisible bodies. especially considering that the visual and physical manifestations of the sites and the bodies were intact. And I was just thinking, would you like, if you would share a bit more about that experience, and also if you have, which I know you have, like experienced some of these similar things elsewhere in your research, and how does this notion of invisibility aid subversion as well?
Yes, I think throughout our whole voyage within Lahore and diving its own timelines, had a very close relationship with this notion of invisibility. And one of those was, uh, I think we have been also researching even before our travel, but one of these was a figure, a very important historical figure, who actually I felt that was always with us during our whole journey, and that is Maharani Jindan Kaur, who is actually a very important female character in the Sikh history, especially thinking that she is a kind of a resistant figure within the history. But within all records, we always see her as the wife of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and the mother of Maharaja Dulip Singh, the last heir of the throne of the Sikh kingdom. But she is actually a very important resilient figure, because she has been fighting with the British colonial forces in order not to lose her land, but and also her son, because he was also kidnapped by the British and was assimilated within time. So she is a figure who actually speaks a lot about this idea of invisibility because of the gender issue, how history reads female figures. And in a sense, I wanted to turn this upside down, and I thought, like, taking her as a reference or as a guide to take us through that journey, and let us kind of render the city through all these aspects of invisibility. And so these are some images from our trip to the Lahore Fort at the Sikh Gallery, which was also like our all encounters within the different spaces we went through were having this aspect of invisibility, and the fact that we are also female, two female artists and researchers. And here, for instance, the day that we have been to the museum itself, there were no electricity, and people were looking to her hands by torches. And in a way, this day was really, really very effective in me. It really affected me so deeply, with this understanding of how also all these sites within Lahore, specifically the Sikh heritage buildings, have become invisible. And yeah, this is a photo of us at one of our visits to the sites. So within the piece, we specifically chose two sites, apart from all these different venues we have been researching through. This is on the way at Nolaka Bazaar, where that was heading to Baitaru Singh Gurdwara. So specifically these two sites that I'm going to show, these are also quite invisible because they are at the heart of the city, and within that chaos and the crowd, when you enter to within their borders, you see that they are completely the unknown. With the fact that when we were searching for these sites, nobody knew where they were, even though the one who was next door did not know what it was about or the real name. So this site by Taru Singh Gurdwara is specifically a site that has a contested history because of the land politics that is going on today. And over there right now, there is a shrine, which is supposedly a fake shrine, who has been, there, and all these land mafia have been trying to cover up the whole site in order to kind of claim the rights of the site. But here, when you enter to the world of this space, especially the tiles of the ground and the movement, I don't know if you can see it clearly, but there is a sense of movement which made us feel that there is a living organism underneath the ground, almost like a living being that is still breathing and enabling the site to be alive. So I think all these reflections, or all these particles, when we gather, there are always these dualities within the work also, who is questioning the death and the living, or the one that is more vocal, or on the other hand, spaces that are beyond silence and timelines. So all these spaces that we have been having all these notions. And so this is still, by the way, from the Baitaru Singh Gurdwara. You can see all these shifts and certain details that kind of lets itself speak, and to the ones who can actually feel it and see it. These are some images from the distracted scriptures on the marble, and in a sense, also there is the domination of this idea of petrification within the work that often, if you watch it, it will reveal itself, because I also associate stone with a sense of wound, because a wound is also something that becomes petrified within time, and then certain things activated. Either you scratch it and you begin to let it bleed and kind of flow. It's kind of the same way how we excavate all these sites.
Mm-hmm.
This is the other site that we have been going through. Again, this is at the heart of the city, at the Temple Road, and this is the Gurdwara Chati Patshahi. And in a way, when you enter from its gates, you feel that there is a different sense of time that is flowing here. This is quite different than the one I have shown previously. This is more of a place where the caretakers are also living. It's a living place for a family as well. So it's kind of more protected comparing to the other. But then this idea of silence is again equal to the first one over here as well. So within the work, the marble hand of Maharani Jindan Kaur is becoming activated, and she becomes, as I said, the guide for us to come back to her own city of origin and render the whole city, and as if she's almost surveying all this idea of death and life, invisibility and visibility access almost.
Yeah, and I'm just now thinking about this, like stretching this idea into the more obvious direction, which is the transition between from invisibility into visibility, sorry.
Yes.
And that the invisible dialogue that takes place between you and the site is then translated into a visibility in your studio, and which is then further shared at different institutions and with audiences. And I'm just, this is a practice of not just production but also of exercising restraint. And I was just thinking, like, can you share a bit about this process? Like, what do we make visible and to what extent?
Yes, I think the production phase in general is something that a phase that allows you to take a distance to all that phase that you have actively experienced, but also it's a moment that leaves you with your own mind and heart, to this extent of deciding what you should make visible and how to protect and safeguard the site also, and also keep on having the respect to all these matters that are not originating from your own geography. So all these questions kind of have been popping up in my mind, but I think whilst working, what has helped me a lot was working with archival images, because in a sense archival images creates a sense of anchor between what is right now invisible and can't be spoken, and it kind of collides with the sequences of the flowing time of the present tense. And another aspect was bringing in again these mosaic-like cubes, was more of a sense of abstraction that was creating all these oblique and linear forms that began to kind of help me to retrace things and to again create a sense of connectivity point between all these timelines. So I think there is a great sense of editing that has been going on, not physically to the video itself, but this editing of these ideas of what to make visible and what not. And I think at this point, I often go back to my own self by searching for my own tendencies and for my own reflections within the site. Like, what do I, like when I look at these specific tiles, where do I find my own reflection within that? And how does it find its place within my own memory? And last but not least, there is obviously one thing that makes things easier, at least to be able to read these histories, is poetry. And I think also the fact that this is the land of all the poets, it helped me a great deal of understanding this idea of departure, division, absence, and specifically the post-partition poetry of Amrita Pritam, like Shiv Kumar Batalvi. And at the end, Bule Shah became a part of the work because his song, which is called Kamli, is at the end of the film that you can hear afterwards, depicts actually Lahore and what Lahore as a city remembers. So the song basically says that what the windows and the doors of the city remembers, the bricks of the city, what they have witnessed and what they are hiding and what type of waters have been passing underneath them, in a sense. So in a way, I think also the fact that through this poetry, there was this aspect of making certain petrified particles vocal, also activated this history by making the hand, the marble hand, become active by, coexisting within different timelines by telling her own narrative. So in a sense, I found my own self within that as well, because I also found it in a way by narrating it myself. And even the song at the end became quite interesting because it is a language like Punjabi or even Urdu during our whole research phase, is a language that I do not know, just barely now I started to understand. But again, still certain things remain invisible for you, but then you have this eye of the heart that feels things, and then it completes a lot of things behind.
Yeah, and I think like this is just leaving me with this thought, and maybe we'll just open the floor for questions. But before that, if we have time, maybe we can come back to this. And I'm just thinking, especially because with the song and you singing in a language that you do not understand or speak, and it just reminded me, or, like this sudden realization about the emotional labor involved in this entire research, like something that is often not spoken about. And also, like working through a certain kind of loss, even if it's not yours, but engaging with even someone else's loss, or, building a relationship with a site, and also then reconstructing memories. And I feel like there's a lot that goes on in that. Like there's a lot of emotional labor involved, and something that you not just process at the site, but also in the studio, and then in the aftermath where you carry it on with us. But yeah, I think we will take some questions, and maybe if there's time, we can come back to that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very intense discussion, and it really feels like you guys had this incredible shared experience, and I suppose, as I was saying, that Lahore was one of the last times that a lot of us were together before we had to sort of retreat to for those of us who have retreats to these inner worlds. And I wanted to ask a little bit about that process for you, Hera, in terms of what happens before the film is made, right? And I guess we got a real sense here of how much research but also how much intuition
Mm-hmm.
goes into that process, right? That there is this kind of intuitive um, relationship to place and to trace and to um, in a way to the memory of stone, to material,
Yes.
that really comes through in this, and that materiality of whether it's the alabaster hand that you found, or as in your work, the kind of motif of the brick, the building block, that material comes through. And I just wondered how this process is working for you now, when you're kind of forced to be where the field work is not possible. How does that sort of affect your process?
I think definitely being at a space physically allows you to have a heart-to-heart conversation with a space, because for me spaces are not like physical borders by walls, or let's say even memory hubs, as it has become something like a kind of a consuming idea these days. But uh, for me it is really like an organism that is if not every space also speaks to me, but like if they do speak in the sense of Lahore in general, that experience stayed with me for a very long time, and it really took a lot of time to render everything within my mind, basically, to be able to feel a sense of belonging to it. And right now specifically it is quite difficult not to be able to engage with a space and to feel it. And but still I think even before, when I make a work, I do a lot of research, as you were also mentioning. And through that research, when something starts to give like goosebumps to you, or like lets your heartbeats become more faster, it is a kind of sign that there is a sense of connectivity to that specific space. And I always believe that, like, if that connection, if that encounter meant to happen, it will happen. Although right now the situation of COVID is totally different, and also with the idea of borders is quite operating in a different way. But I think this work specifically affected me in a very different sense of understanding my own geography. And when I often go back to it and watch it right now, even whilst talking about it, made me understand how it is very, very important to engage with a space and have a spiritual relationship to it. Like it's more personal than looking at it as an artwork. I don't look it as an artwork. It's more like a kind of poetry to me, almost.
Thank you. So we have a question from Ari Ackermans.
Mhm.
Hera, you've been working in all the fragile territories like Jerusalem, Istanbul, Lahore, and Naples, so dependent on historical narratives.
Mhm.
How do these reconstructions/unveiling
Mhm.
connect to a possible gaze at the future of these places?
Mhm. Mhm. I think all these deconstructions of these spaces kind of allows you to have it makes you gain different ways of seeing things. Let it be more like a kind of, you know, by making some realities upside down and trying to see it from that point of view. It's a matter of improving different ways of perspectives and seeing it, and also the moment that you are today also really defines those ways of seeing very effectively. So whilst all that experiences, that was what I have been doing, trying to find different methodologies, no matter how much it connects with my usual let's say language. Although I feel that there each time there is a different experience and these different challenges, which actually Hajra asked, but I actually completely forgot. Now I realized through all those challenges, it also really affects the way how the work manifests itself, and how you see things, like these inaccessibilities, or how you as a female artist, like when you are on site, what you are experiencing there and how it coincides with what's all you are researching and all these ruptures, you know. So it's I guess these ways of seeing differs from case to case, but at the end of the day, it's all about deconstructing and reconstructing a repetition, I guess.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the audience or any comments or feedback? We'd love to hear from you. I see a few familiar names here. And just to say that, the film, I hope that you guys have seen the film, and we'll leave it online for another day or two so that you can, if you didn't get a chance to watch it before this discussion, you still have the opportunity. We have a comment from Temia Zaman saying, thank you, mesmerizing talk and insights and about memory and forgetting. She's excited to see the film. Thank you, Temia.
Thank you.
While we wait for more questions, I wanted to actually address the question. Wafa? Hi.
Yes, I can't raise my, I don't know where to, I can't find the icon to raise my hand.
All right.
So I just thought I'd come in, jump in. Hera, thank you, and Hajra, thank you so much to you both. I have a question about process as well. If you could talk a little bit about the choices that you made in your collages. Why did you choose the cubic form and the material that you chose, that you decided to choose for that particular class? Is the cubic form, was it because it was architectural, building blocks? If you could just go through that bit of a process, that would be great.
Yes. The cubic form is something that often manifests in my work quite often because as for the beginning, like Byzantine art and all these mosaic compositions and the aesthetics of it have been influencing me a lot in my work. And in a sense, in every different story or in many different research of mine, it comes in front of me somehow. And in the case of the Amritsar project, there was this one moment when I was visiting Jallianwala Bagh, this park, the memorial park I was mentioning, and there were these bullet marks on the wall, and all these bullet marks were traced by these white cubic, let's say, traces. And that was actually a beginning point of tracing a wound or tracing something comes from a painful past, and we are still seeing it from the present tense point of view. So and then the whole brick architecture within Punjab, even in the Pakistani side, I mean, it's not different for me. Like Punjab is Punjab, but like the whole architecture, the brick architecture again has a cubic form, and it gives you this sense that it is almost like kind of otherworldly, you know, with all those perspectives and edges. And another aspect obviously was the Sikh architecture, specifically the use of the white marble, white and black specifically. And so all these repetitions and all these reflections that were constantly coming in front of me made me kind of you know, use this form and repeat this form, but letting it flow in a sense from unexpected corners. And in that case, the ones that I have been showing were photographs from different cities of Punjab that I have been taking. And so some of them start to become like a fountain, but a more petrified fountain, you know, that again, I guess resonates with this idea of wound and the relationship of stone together. You know, stone itself is more something concrete, but when it becomes a fluid, it's more active and it's more flowing, just like time itself. So I wanted to trace that. And also, I guess it's more like a mapping for my own self to understand somewhere also, I guess.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. I had a question for Hajra.
Yes.
Which is, how was your experience in terms of, I guess, being the facilitator in this process of being the host, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of a complex maneuver, especially when you're working with an artist who is kind of searching for something, right? You're both trying to open doors, but you're also translating in some sense. And I think that's a constant function of the curatorial, but I think, you know, our roles in terms of how we conceive projects and work with artists keep shifting, and sometimes it becomes very collaborative, sometimes it's not. But here it sounds as if you guys were really on this kind of journey together, right? And I wondered if you could talk a bit about that experience.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think just taking up from your previous point, Nada, this was, I think there is a lot of intuition involved in it, and also a sense of ownership, I think, and how you feel about the project. I think that it wasn't very easy, and I just would like to also mention that the research phase of our project was also connected with 2 institutions. So we were on an artist residency at the National College of Arts, and then we were also collaborating with Lahore University of Management Sciences as well. And so it was basically like, even for us to get to Lahore and to be able to do this research, because I think there was also this idea that perhaps an institutional affiliation might, you know, help the process. But I think like, however we got there, which was after a very long process and putting things together, I think it's really been also this, I think for us, like the priority was the project throughout and just trying to get as much done as possible, because we literally like starting from going to the Evacuee Trust Property Board to get an NOC, and from there to going to each site by ourselves, and, you know, walking or going in rickshaws. And I would just say that in one way, like I was up for everything to make it happen, but so was Hera. Like she was completely on board. A lot of times, and I was just thinking the other day that things have changed so much within this small, this really short span of time, like even from last year to this year. But I don't think we would do a lot of things that we did. Like we just literally like jumped into things, and we took a lot of initiative. Like a lot of these places, it's interesting that, and also like slightly embarrassing for me, because I've lived in Lahore for 5 years, but it was also a mode of discovery for me. Like a lot of these sites I was also going to for the first time and just discovering. And also then, you know, like kind of depending on the kindness of people, like the common man, and just trying to talk our way through. So it's also interesting where we speak about invisible bodies. It's also that as women, we are also not seen as a threat. So a lot of times where they feel like they can exercise power over us by saying, oh, okay, you can do this. We let you do this, but not this. So, you know, just going with that, but taking out whatever we can. And then I think in that, like, there were also instances, I think on our last day of shooting, we were harassed by these young teenagers asking us, who have you taken permission from, and how can you do this, and everything. So yeah, it has been. But yeah, I think it's really been like, I think we were equally on board for everything. Like, and I think that really made that process, like, facilitating it a bit easier, but also being really invested in it as well. Like Hera was, because she was carrying this research that I wasn't a part of in Amritsar. But just from what I knew from her and from her practice, I was just really invested in learning and working with her, and also learning about the city. So yeah, yeah, I think yeah.
You know, it was very special to see the film screened in the museum, in the Sikh galleries. And I think for those in our audience who may not be familiar, the people who basically left Lahore at partition in 1947 included a very large Sikh community. And especially in the Punjab, while partition stories are now being told, and there's a lot of work that has been done in reclaiming those histories, it's still seen somehow as a Hindu-Muslim history rather than a history that includes Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, these kind of very complex relationships of caste exist on both sides of the border. There are many minorities within those religions whose lives were transformed by those historic shifts. And it's those micro histories that have been buried. I think what's extraordinary about Sikh history is that Lahore for them was not a sort of micro history, it was one of the most important sites. The kind of work that is reclaiming these stories is quite recent. And I feel like this film, especially unearthing the story of this female character who arguably was a victim, not of local forces, but of colonial forces, right? Her kind of story includes, is very intertwined with the history of British imperialism in the region. Is one of those characters that I hope people will learn about and be curious about and start to sort of excavate through this film. With that, I will say thank you. I'm just going to check to see if we've got any other messages here, but we don't. So I'm going to say thank you very much to the audience for joining us today. I've just put a link into the chat. We've got a little survey that we would love for you to fill out if you have a couple of minutes. Thank you to both our speakers for their time and insights tonight, to the Al Sarkal Arts Foundation team, Wafa, Poonam, and Bestin, who've been with us throughout. We really enjoyed doing this. And as I said, the exhibition is on at Green Art Gallery at Al Sarkal Avenue. So if you're in Dubai, I hope you will pop in and watch the film. And also see the more recent sculptural work that is presented here. So thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I was just saying that thank you again for this enriching conversation, Hera. It's always such a pleasure to speak to you. And once again, I'm left with so much to think about and an even stronger urge to carry on and develop this conversation further. And once again, grateful to Nada, Wafa, Bestin, Poonam, and Al Sarkal for this opportunity, and to everyone who joined us and participated in this conversation.
Thank you so much. I guess getting back to these time span that we have been spending together and try to look at it today and try to read it from today's point of view was really enriching for me as well. And thank you, Nada, and to the whole team to create this possibility for us to discuss it also live over here. Thank you so much.
Take care, guys. We'll say good night.
You too. Good night.
Bye.